Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting details and updates, changes on maps, so let's start. And first let's talk about Kharkiv direction, where the Ukrainian forces continue attempts to attack the Russian forces inside of Glubokaya and in the direction of the stronghold with the purpose to force the Russians to fall back from this territory. During the previous night, the Ukrainians were attacking the Russians using this road of attack, and the Ukrainians were trying to get Russian positions along this tree line and to probably reinforce or to rotate Ukrainian forces that are currently located in the northern farms. Both attempts from the Ukrainian side first were discovered by the Russians, and after that the Russians started bombing and attacking the Ukrainian concentration of forces with aviation. A lot of FABs arrived in this area. The Ukrainians suffered significant losses and were forced to fall back, and their attempts failed. But these are not the most important things. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians also began using additional tactics, how to force the Russians to fall back from this area and how to defeat the Russians. For these purposes, the Ukrainians decided to cross Travyanskaya water reservoir. So this big water barrier is Travyanskaya water reservoir, and according to a group of forces north, the Ukrainians decided to cross this area and to land infantry somewhere in this direction. The Ukrainians were trying to build more or less reliable foothold here, and from these positions the Ukrainians were planning to attack the Russian forces in the northern direction with the purpose to cut the main supply, not the main, but one of the supply roads that the Russians still use to support their forces in the most northern farms. And on the other hand, the Ukrainians were planning to attack the Russians from behind. The Russians reported that they managed to discover this concentration of forces and to discover the upcoming Ukrainian plans, and they start bombing and attacking this territory as well. The Ukrainians suffered losses, and their attempt to cross the Travyanskaya water reservoir failed. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Volchansk direction. Today we got additional details about Russian foothold that located on the Ukrainian side of the Seversky Donetsk River. I'll remind you that softly we have added these footholds to the southwest of Prylipka, but today the Russians reported that they managed to establish the foothold, and they managed to expand this foothold in the northern part of this village. So summarizing everything, we can make a conclusion that most likely the Russians landed and crossed Seversky Donetsk River and established a foothold somewhere here, not in the original, let's say, position that we colored a few weeks ago, but here. For now, we still haven't received any geolocations that can confirm this, so we will not change the map until we get something, but just to keep in mind that maybe the Russian foothold is located here. Now let's move further. Let's talk about Kupiansk direction. The Russians and the Ukrainian sources continue reporting about additional Russian progress along the railways. The Russians are pushing, dealing significant damage to the Ukrainians with artillery, with aviation, with Avtos flamethrower systems. In this video we can see the next Ukrainian stronghold on the way of the Russian forces from Kislovka-Kotlarovka to Kupiansk. As you can see, this is well fortified area with intersection of road and railway, and this is something like Rocket, very powerful stronghold, and the Russians are bombing this territory for now without any changes on the ground. Now let's move to the southern Kupiansk direction. We have additional progress on the ground according to pro-Ukrainian mappers. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their positions, and as you can see, according to this change on map, the Russians are moving to Zhiribets River and to get as close as possible to the village of Nevskaya. Let's talk about Siversk direction, because during the previous night we got, of the local time, we got one of the most important update. The Russian sources published the video how they managed to raise the flag inside of the village by the name of Ivano-Darivka. As I understand, this was very fast. This attack, let's say Russian offensive was very fast, really fast. The Ukrainians didn't expect this offensive operation, as I understand, because after the fall of Sporny, as I remember, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that the village of Sporny fell and was captured by the Russians maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, and during the previous 2 weeks, the Russians managed to develop their offensive and to force the Ukrainians to fall back from the next village of Ivano-Darivka. Obviously, this is significant progress of the armed force of Russian Federation, and telling the truth, from now on there are no more towns, cities or villages between the Russians and Siversk itself. There is a rich network of the fortifications, trenches, strongholds, but no more towns and no more villages or any settlements of any type. And this is very important, and this is the Russian flag, as you can see, raised upon the building. And if we calculate the distance between Russian positions and, let's say, Siversk itself, then we can make a conclusion that the current distance between the first buildings and the new Russian positions is less than 8 kilometers. So this is disaster. Of course, there are 3 big strongholds. This is the first one, this is the second one, and this is the third one. But I'm not sure that the Ukrainians are able to hold the Russians for a very long time along this road. Most likely the Russians will continue offensive. Now they will attack Vyimka because now they have more reliable positions. And of course, from this direction, the Russians can attack in direction of Verkhnyokamyanska from the south. Anyway, the situation for the Ukrainians is very difficult. Now let's move further. Let's talk about New York. As you can see, Chasiv Yar, New York, we haven't received anything important. Let's talk about Western Avdiivka direction. According to different mappers, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in the vicinity around the village of Progress, and in these changes on map, according to different mappers, the Russians managed to capture this forest completely, and some sources are saying, some pro-Russian sources are saying that the Russians have already entered the first buildings, the first streets of Progress itself. I'm not sure whether Ukrainians are able to hold this village for a very long time or not, but most likely the Russians are able to capture this territory very fast. Today we got additional confirmation from the northern Novoselovka Persha. In this video that was geolocated in this part of the village, we can see the movements and the work of Russian soldiers that were moving from one building to another, clearing the territory from Ukrainian soldiers, from those who were abandoned by the Ukrainian armed forces. This video confirms complete Russian control over the southern part, and that the battle for the southern part is about to begin or have already started. Let's wait, of course, because the southern part, the Ukrainians are not going to hold the southern part for a very long time. After a very short operational pause, the Russians began moving to the village of Karlovka. For now, the Russians are trying to secure the flanks and to capture the tree lines and the fortifications, and as I understand, now the Russians are planning to attack first these farms and to establish the foothold here, and basing on these positions, the Russians will try to move further in the western direction. The Ukrainian sources published the video how they were bombing and attacking the Russian forces inside of this forest, which confirms complete Russian control over this territory. Now let's move to Ugledar direction, where the Russians during the previous 3 days managed to develop significant results, significant success. According to information we have, the Ukrainians are retreating, they're running away from the fields towards the strongholds like coal mines and so on, and the Russians are pushing and capturing more and more territories. In the northern part, the Russians managed to improve their positions a little bit according to neutral mappers, and in the southern part, the Russians managed to capture additional fields and the tree lines, forcing the Ukrainians to fall back. Obviously significant progress, and with the same tempo, with the same speed, the Russians by the end of the next week obviously will begin clashes for the coal mines, for the strongholds, for the fortifications, and we're gonna receive 100% proofs of complete control, not just of few kilometers along T0524 road, but maybe 33 or even 50% of the road would be already under complete Russian control. As for Vremivka tactical bridgehead Zaporozhye, we haven't received anything important, and the starting of yesterday we entered the completely new page of the special military operation. Something new started happening all over the entire territory of Ukraine, and we are talking about strikes of the locals against power restrictions. If you remember, just yesterday we were talking that in the town by the name of Poltava, the Ukrainians began meetings. They start blocking the roads, not allowing the Ukrainians military authorities, just local authorities, to use the roads because they were blocked due to the power restrictions and strikes against these measures. And today we see that 2 more towns was included to this process. According to information we have, the strikes also began in the town of Zaporozhye. That's according to Putin peace plan should become a part of Russian Federation if Russia begins with Ukraine, let's say, peace negotiations. So people went on the streets demanding and requiring the locals to lift off any restrictions and to give people electricity. If you remember, just a few days ago we were talking that some regions in Ukraine haven't been receiving electricity and power for more than 2 days in a row as a result of hot weather and Russian missile strikes. And the third town that's also begun striking is Kremenchuk, that located along a Dnipro river. In this video we can see another group of Ukrainians who were blocking the main roads and basically blocking the traffic, at least in this small region, in small area of the city. Of course, as for 19th of July, these people are not able to change anything in Ukraine, but obviously if the weather is going to be the same, if the Russians continue attacking the energy facilities, the situation is going to be even more and more worse for Ukrainians, and more towns are going to take part, are going to join this strike. You know that Ukrainians, of course, they're tired of war, but the problem is that they can't strike and they can't say anything against about the end of the conflict and against Zelensky, but nobody can refuse them to strike against these power measures and these power restrictions. And of course, based on this, we can say that this is like strikes against power restrictions, but basically these are the strikes against Zelensky and his regime and his way to run Ukraine. And that's it for today, for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.